Good afternoon. It's really disappointing when you have a women in mining panel and you walk in and the first thing is like, all the men in the room leave. It seems like you end up having, well, there's a few, but it seems you end up having a conversation with those who are already, it's like you're preaching to the converted. Those who have left really should have stayed to be part of this conversation. We should have just locked the doors. Welcome to this Women in Mining panel. I'm your moderator. I'm Muza Gondwe. I'm a project advisor with International Women in Mining, and I'm also a project manager with the Association of Women in Mining in Africa. My role particularly with the Association of Women in Mining in Africa, AWIMA, which we call it for short, is a network, a continental network of national associations in Africa. So 22 national associations fit under AWIMA, and AWIMA is working hard to set up national associations in 5 other countries. My particular role with AWIMA is I manage a jewelry project, and the vision of that jewelry project is amongst AWIMA members, we have women who own gold mines, who own gemstone mines, who are gem cutters, who are jewelers, and what we want to do is create a supply chain from mine to market that is led by women. So imagine a jewelry product that has gold from women miners in Mali, sapphires from women miners in Madagascar, cut by lapidarists in Zambia, and designed by jewelers in Kenya. So that is our vision. Hopefully at the next ADU, I can be like, look at this beautiful product that these women have made. But I am delighted to be joined this afternoon by 3 amazing and powerful women. I'd like to introduce my panel. I'll start first with Ms. Tira Robson at the far end. Tira is the CFO and Company Secretary of Sipa Resources Limited, a junior explorer with projects in Uganda and West Australia. With a career in mineral exploration spanning over 23 years, she has held roles with other listed entities, including Anvil Mining and Brockman Resources. Prior to that, Ms. Robson was a senior audit manager with a major accounting practice. She's an eager member of Women in Mining. In her spare time, she's the treasurer for Team Connect WA, an innovative program connecting adolescent girls from low participation groups with their local community through cricket. Welcome. Trish, who I'm sure is a friendly face to many people in this room. Trish O'Reilly, sitting in the middle there, is an international social policy and planning specialist with more than 30 years experience in mining, government, health, and not-for-profit sectors. She has a collaborative approach to stakeholder management and is skilled in engaging different cultures and demographic groups to achieve shared value in response to identified issues. She currently works as an independent consultant and is actively engaged in diverse projects including aged care, modern slavery and orphanage trafficking, mentoring, submission writing, international research, poverty reduction programs, including the development of sustainable agriculture projects to alleviate poverty in developing international communities. Welcome, Trish. Sitting right next to me is Kristie Young. Kristie Young is a non-executive director with the listed company Primero. She's an advisor and director of client development with HardHat, and she also sits on the Wesley College board and the board of Petroleum Club of WA. Kristie has graduated as a mining engineer 25 years ago. She worked both underground and open-cut operations before her career diversified to include teaching maths in Canada, working in executive search, lecturing mine finance economics at Curtin, running a diversity inclusion consultancy. She most recently had senior growth roles with both EY and PwC, and throughout her career, Kristie has been an advocate for opportunities for all within the mining industry and is seen as a trusted advisor and mentor within the industry. Welcome. It's been a difficult year for all of us with COVID-19, and we thought we'd start the discussion specifically looking at COVID-19 and the impact of women in mining. Figures early in the year, or reports early in the year said, if you look at countries that had female leaders, the way they managed the pandemic in their countries, so whether you look at New Zealand, whether you look at Taiwan, whether you look at Germany, that they managed their response much better to countries that had male leaders, and there's data to back that up. So this demonstrates that women are competent and effective leaders in a crisis. But if we now look specifically at women in mining, what have been the benefits for women? What have been the losses? What have we gained? What can we accelerate? So let me start first with you, Tira. You have operations both in Uganda and Australia. What has the impact of COVID-19 been for the women that work in your jurisdictions or work in your company?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I should say that during COVID, we had our joint venture in Uganda with Rio Tinto cease, and we sort of put it in care and maintenance, so some of the questions aren't particularly relevant, but we certainly still have engagement with the community there and people on the ground who are helping me to assess this. When I actually tried to interrogate that question a little bit, I thought it wasn't actually too dissimilar to here. The COVID clearly has had a disproportionate effect on women the world over. Part of that may be the types of employment that they engage in an Australian sort of sphere. If you could just quickly say hospitality, over there it would be the assistance in the intestinal mining, it might be the crushing, the cooking, the domestic sort of work, which is first to go. When you lay that over the layer of the women are now still the person who is responsible for the childcare within the home, pulling them out of the workforce, having them be responsible for both of the activities, as well as they tend to be the primary caregiver in terms of sick, whether it be parents or whatever. And this is a big problem in Uganda because whilst I'd say Uganda certainly has dealt with things like Ebola and they're not immune, they're pretty familiar with dealing with a pandemic. This was a little bit different. Our project's in northern Uganda. It has a very high refugee population, very close quarters, and so in addition to everything that I mentioned that we might be experiencing here, the domestic violence, it's the close quarters and the impact on food security, or even more important, the water security and having the need to go to communal places where soap is not even accessible anymore. So that's how I see some of the parallels and dissimilarities between how we've dealt with it here.
Thank you for providing a company perspective. Maybe I'll now move over to Trish, who in your previous role as CEO, you engaged with a lot of governments, you engaged with the Australian government through DFAT. What do you think the impact of COVID-19 has been in terms of the bilateral relationship between Australia and Africa? What is the role of mining companies or of governments in that space?
First of all, I think we've got to look at the Australian government, African governments, a number of governments. Africa is not just one country. And Australia basically ignores Africa. In my previous role as CEO, once a month I'd go to Canberra and I'd try and engage the East Coast in Africa, and they weren't interested at all. So in terms of bilateral agreements and COVID, I don't think Australia has played, and this is the Australian government, has played much of a role at all. It's been really disappointing.
Is there any advice you could give the Australian government about what they can do in terms of a bilateral relationship?
I spent 10 years trying to give them advice. I mean, the good thing is we have Linda Reynolds as the Defence Minister, who is actually a West Australian. She gets it, but I think that whole relationship, it's how we sell Africa to Australia, and we haven't sold it, and we have to do it. Africa matters to Australia, and we've got to work on that issue.
Africa Matters, we'll make that the theme for next year. Over to you, Kristie. I know COVID-19 has had a negative impact for a number of communities, but some people say with women in mining, there's been some potential benefits for them. What are the benefits that have come out of COVID-19 for women in mining? What should we not lose sight of? What can we accelerate for gender equality in mining?
Yeah, sure. Is that working? Yeah. I think what you just mentioned then, Trish, is also very interesting. Africa matters, but also mining matters. So I think globally, if we think about it from a more holistic view, mining itself is not well understood by the general population, and I think that actually ties in with the diversity of the workforce that we do or don't have. But definitely throughout COVID, it's changed people's working behaviour. Many years ago, or probably about 8 years ago, I used to run a diversity, or 6 years ago rather, diversity and inclusion consultancy business, back when BHP were just starting their diversity councils. And what was clear is that the culture of large companies, they really wanted to be able to allow their employees to work in a flexible way, but the culture of these companies really didn't enable them to do that, even though they wanted to. So I think one of the real advantages from COVID, if we look at the silver lining or some of those positives, has been the ability of those companies to now allow their people to work in a flexible way. and to work from home, which is something that had not really occurred in the past. And some of the companies now are also looking at permanently reducing the number of offices that they have in the city and allowing their people to work in a more flexible way. The oil and gas industry actually, Woodside and Shell have made their people go back to work, which I found to be quite interesting. But the mining companies, it's actually improved a lot around the way that they work and the culture, which then both males and females working in a flexible way, because that's the important thing too. It's not just females. So, I mean, from that perspective, you would think that that will have a positive effect on the diversity of the workforce as we move further into the future.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. Yeah, diversity, shared work, flexibility with work has certainly been highlighted through COVID-19 and is having, for some women, a good impact, but then it's also increasing their burden at home, working at home, taking care of the children and managing all of that. But there's certainly
That's where the guys should do. I mean, if you have a child, you male and female, but yeah, I mean, I think that's becoming a bit more shared, but also within society more broadly, that is changing. And that if that continues to change and it's more accepted that men can work from home, take the children to daycare, etc., all those things, that will further improve the stats.
Speaking of changing, and another major event this year was Black Lives Matter. So Black Lives Matter really cast a light on racial injustice, inequality, and is creating opportunities to forge meaningful change for people of colour. If we look at the Australian mining sector, there's very few women of colour in senior technical roles. Why is that the case?
Yeah, are you asking me
Yes,
again? Okay,
Kristie.
right. Look, I think it's a tricky one. Getting females into technical roles in the first place is difficult, let alone, you know, what the colour of someone's skin is. And that's something, again, that I think ties into the image of mining. I think that as an industry, the mining industry needs to do a lot better in promoting, you know, why it's essential. So I think, yeah, the percentages of females studying engineering and the technical degrees hasn't actually really changed that much over time. At the moment, too, a lot of the degrees are disappearing, which is a problem as well. There's a skills shortage right now that'll only continue in the next few years. I think women in STEM, I mean, I loved my engineering degree. Engineering was such a great course. My daughter's year 12. I almost had her put in to study engineering, but, you know, maybe she'll change later. But it's just tricky, I think, getting the females into the workforce. Once they're there, though, typically over time, the mining industry has been such that when you have a child, you stay home. It's harder. So there's a lot of change to come. But yeah, it's not an easy thing to solve.
Can I just interrupt there? I actually think we have changed a lot. I've come through the 70s and 80s where I remember at school saying I wanted to change the world. They said, well, you can't. You can be a teacher, a hairdresser or a nurse. I said, well, I don't want to be any of those things. And that doesn't happen now, thank God. So I actually think we have moved, but change takes time, and we are getting there. I feel that we are getting there.
We are, I mean, definitely the leaders. Like if you look at Fortescue, South 32, some of the bigger mining companies, they've just gone ahead and done it. I think Fortescue's more than half their board's female CEO. I mean, they're second on the ASX now behind BHP. They've overtaken Rio. So the fact that females are leading it, that's one factor, not all. I mean, it's great that the iron ore price is high as well. That helps. But the culture of that company is very progressive. And so, whereas years ago, when I graduated 25 years ago, there were no female leaders in mining that I can recall. I mean, the internet was only just starting in '95, the year that I finished uni. So I think things have changed a lot. And also, the percentage of females in industry is not that great, but the percentage female leaders has changed a lot.
Do you think, and over to you, Tara, with change, do you think we'll come to a point where we'll have all women boards?
That's nice and aspirational. last week on my LinkedIn, I was following one of the people that I follow is Karina Bader. She's an analyst for Acorn Capital, and she's the non-executive chairman of a company called Monaghetti. Now, they hope to list next June. Their chief executive is also female, as is the other Ned. So they are a 3-person board, all women, which is quite interesting. Outside of our industry, I've seen it happen a little bit more, but that's very unusual for an exploration company. I've been lucky enough. Sipa, for those of you who don't know, is a very small company. We've been dabbling in mineral exploration we call ourselves a senior explorer because we've been around so long. I've been there in some way, shape, or form since 2004 and had my previous chief executive was female, and we've had a female board member since 2004. So that was that's certainly rare. So I mean, when you looked, we didn't have diversity policies, but you go into our annual report and said, well, we kind of don't need to because, you know, we've got 50% of the board and 100% of the executive team is female. So. Can we do better? Absolutely. And I do think that we have come a long way, even in 10 years. One of the things about COVID, not pulling you back to that topic again, but I had this sense, whether it's as a mother, you know, as someone in the industry, that COVID was really going to set us back, particularly on this. You know, in times of turmoil, we all pull back and refrain into our shell. And, you know, it was disaster sheep stations. If I could take you back to the end of March, what we all felt like. We escaped so lightly here in Perth. But what that actually felt like. And, yeah, I find that really interesting. But the opportunity, as Kristie highlighted, was absolutely never have we had an opportunity to really say, okay, guys, guess what? We can work from home. We've been doing it for years. You've been paying me for 4 days. I work 5. Never mind that. But I always had to earn that. Always had to. And I wouldn't have been dissimilar to anyone else. And now, when everybody's doing it, apparently you can do it.
So one of the things that you've all mentioned is, you know, you've talked about we had 50%, we've had 100%. In 1970s, it was like this. In 2010, it was like that. And really, it's about the numbers and the data and whether or not we're actually progressing to have more equality. There's been a lot of spotlight on the importance of gender disaggregated data. So Kristie, what do you think the value is of having really good gender disaggregated data?
Yeah, I mean, it's great that the WGEA Workplace Gender Equality Agency mandates that if you've got over 100 employees, and you must report on your statistics. So that's a really good source of information. I think, so in my previous role with PwC, myself and another, we basically helped the CME to write their diversity report that was released earlier this year. But I mean, that report's good, but not every company is putting their data in. They have to voluntarily say, I'd like my data to be. So, of course, if I put my engineering mathematical brain on, the data's only as good as what's being inputted. You can't analyse data if the inputs aren't adequate. But the WGEA stats are probably the best, and anyone can go in there and look at them. You can pull up any company you like and see how many females I've got across the board from the top to the bottom. So, yeah, I mean, I would say that the quality of the data matters. And it is interesting that since I graduated from uni, the stats haven't actually changed that much, but in the leadership, as I mentioned before, they have. But it's important, the data's important, because that's all we really have to go on.
Yeah, the data is definitely important to track progress, and it's great that we have WGEA in Australia, but in Africa we don't have similar information. So Trish, in your previous role with AMEG and the advisory boards that you sit on with AFRIC, what do you think companies that mine in Africa can do about generating meaningful data, sharing that data, and for what purpose?
First of all, I'll go back to what you said, because I actually think, yeah, you can have 100% of women on a board, but you don't just have a person on a board because they're a woman. You have people on a board because of their skills, and I think sometimes we forget that, and I hate it when we're collecting data and it's 50% of the women have to be in these sort of positions. No, if they're not actually qualified to do that, they shouldn't. But what we should be doing is encouraging and mentoring and pushing women, because I actually think men and women are equal, but I think women lack confidence, and it's about how we build that so that they can do whatever they want to do. What was the question again? I went off track.
Gender disaggregated data in the African context.
Look, I saw Bill, I think, in the audience somewhere. Is he there? Oh, he was there. Look, I think AMIC is doing so many things, trying to do too many things, and you've just got to focus on a couple of things to do them properly. It's something that we should do, but I don't necessarily think it should be something from AMIC, and certainly the advisory council that I'm on at UWA, that's something that they could do, and we could use that information.
All right, thank you. My last question before I open it up to the audience is about leadership. And you've talked about mentoring and using mentoring as an opportunity to develop confidence for young people coming up in the industry. You and I were both at a session at UWA a couple of weeks ago where one of the speakers talked about leadership as a transformational tool. So leadership not as a position, not that you're a CEO or you're an MD, but using that opportunity to transform and bring others up with you. In your leadership role, you've talked about mentoring. What else are you doing to create transformation opportunities for young women coming up?
Okay, before I say that, my background is in child sexual abuse, and I see my chairman, ex-chairman, Bill Turner here, and he obviously saw some skills in me that I could change from child sexual abuse to come into the mining industry. And I remember him saying to me, once we developed AMIC, well, we want you to be the CEO. I said, I'm not going to be the CEO. What do I know about mining? But it's about building confidence, having confidence in yourself, and continuing to do whatever you want to do. But as you do that, you have to bring women along with you, because women do lack confidence. And I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room, the women that do get to the top, but they eat other women on the way. And I've had women like that, and that's shocking. And I think whatever role you're doing, pull women along with you. And they've got the skills, they just need the confidence, and they need mentoring. And if we do that, we'll have a lot more women in roles. And I've actually tried to do that after AMIC. I'm now on 2 boards and a JP sitting on SAT, and within those roles I mentor and I support women.
Just quickly, I think it's important to remember that some guys need confidence too. So when I was running my diversity and inclusion consultancy business 6 years ago, I actually was paid to mentor a guy at BHP who was taking on a secondment role as a manager. So he was lacking confidence. So it's not just females. I think it's everyone, individuals themselves. And I think another point that to me is important is everyone needs to own their own career. So when I first started working flexibly was back in 2006 when I was working in recruitment, and I was employed to work part-time. But what ended up happening is I was working from home as well, and was ended up being the 3rd highest performer out of 25. And I thought to myself, I'm actually working flexibly. That's what it is. And obviously that particular career enabled me to do that. It's much more difficult if you're working on a mine site to work flexibly. That's trickier if you're physically on site. But I sort of, from that point, I thought, this is the way it works. And there's plenty of males and females who do work in a flexible way and own it. If you're delivering and the culture enables you to deliver, it shouldn't physically matter where you're working from. If that role enables you to, it's on your outputs, not your inputs as such. So I found that to be quite interesting. But I think everyone needs to own their own career and just do it.
I wouldn't mind touching on the confidence bit a little bit more. I was recently with a running group, and I was running next to this new friend, and she works for a very large company, happens to be in the oil and gas, has a great job, absolutely adores her job, quite a high up position, a position they wouldn't have thought really adapted that well to COVID, but did. And they were having a major health and safety risk assessment at the convention center, so they took it off-site and off they went. She was one female in a room of 80 males. And I said, how could that possibly be? I know where you work. Like, that could not possibly be. And in health and safety, like when I go to mines department things, safety updates, it's half women. How is this? And so I was exposed to the fact that maybe oil and gas wasn't doing it as well as hard rock was doing it. But I couldn't, and she's a little bit younger than me, not a lot, but a little bit, and I thought, there's just no way, with all my confidence, I could not speak up regardless of a risk in the room when it's that weighted. So we need the mentors, we need the push to make, that just shouldn't happen. That room, you shouldn't even set up a risk assessment like that and expect a good result. To be, particularly because if you're being pushed about a health and safety issue, come on, you're soft, that sort of thing. Like, it was just mind-boggling to me that that could actually happen today.
Sometimes the issue when a woman is very confident, people can perceive it as being arrogant, and it's not the same perception that they put on men when a man is confident. Do you have any advice for people in those kinds of situations when they're being confident but being perceived as being arrogant?
Just ignore it and carry on. Like, no matter what you do, someone's not going to like something. And I think as you get older, like I'm 46, I'm like, who cares, right? Just carry on. You'll always get people knocking you, whether male, female. And at the end of the day, I think people just need to be nice to each other.
And I agree. I'm 63 and I've had people say to me, oh, I can't talk to you because, you're scary. I don't think I'm scary. I just say what I think. And I think you have to do that.
But mentors, if we can just really plunge that. Some of my best mentors have been male. Like, this is not find a woman who's been there, done that before you. That helps sometimes. I'm pretty sure we would all, those of us with kids, we all say, find your tribe and, keep them close, because they're a lot cheaper than counseling at the end of the day. If you can just get together for a book club or whatever and realize you're actually probably doing a pretty good job at this. But yeah, some of my best mentors, male, they weren't necessarily industry. They may have been in the accounting world, but they're just these people you say that you've come across in your life for a reason. And you might not know what it is at the time, but it works, and embrace that and pay back, pay forward.
I was just going to say that majority of the successful males you see that runs like mining companies have mentors and have had mentors since they were quite young. So it's a male and female thing to be truly successful. And some people even call it like your personal board of mentors. And I think that's very important, no matter who you are, to have people that have been there, done that experience, can guide you through, no matter whether you are male or female.
Must just say, my husband ran a mining service company, and he had me as his mentor, and he was very successful, so he's very lucky. But you don't always have to marry a mentor.
All right, I'd like to open up to questions from the audience. We'll take maybe 3 questions first, and please introduce yourself and say, if you're directing your question to any particular panelist, please let us know.
My name is Bill Turner. In terms of the pool of women who have gone through the education process and have experience and are ready to take senior positions in leadership teams or on the boards of companies, how does the size of the pool of women in that position compare with the size of the pool of men in a similar position?
I think it depends on the position, Bill. Like, I would suggest, if depending what skill set you're looking, I would have thought that finance and legal, 50-50. I mean, really very close. The technical things, that is a real challenge for the industry. I'm not really sure why Kristie's daughter doesn't want to do engineering. I'm not sure why my daughter doesn't want to do engineering. But that's we need to get in the schools and crack that on the head. But it really does depend on the occupation.
But also it's about women. When you have a position, and we all know this, men will say, I can do those 10 things that are needed, and a woman will say, well, I can do 2 of them. And again, and I agree, some men don't have confidence, but I think generally women don't, and they should just say, let me give it a go and see what happens.
Oh, well, I'll ask a question then. It's Phil McKeever from Gilbert and Tobin. I came in a couple of minutes late, so apologies if this has already been dealt with. But obviously the NGOs and the charities are very focused on advancement of women in developing countries because that does lead to significant inroads in sort of economic development, etc. But a lot of the NGOs and charities are against mining. So what would you say to Oxfam Australia, for example, that does not want donations from mining companies?
I can actually answer that. When I was CEO of AMIC, I actually worked with Oxfam on a guide for women in mining. Look, I think historically the big NGOs have hated miners. My background is NGO, and then I came into mining, and now I'm sitting on the board of Wheelchairs for Kids. So I think it's up to us to educate people and to change thinking. Mining is a good thing. If we didn't have mining, we wouldn't have cars, all sorts of things. So we need to have mining. We absolutely need it. And there's some really good charities out there, and we need to work with those charities and NGOs and work together to make a difference. When I first came into AMIC, I had a number of miners that said to me they're sick of seeing NGOs driving their 4-wheel drives around with their funding and not doing anything. But I think we have to change that perception on both sides.
Trish, one thing that I found really interesting throughout COVID is everyone's globally mining doesn't have a great name. The brand really needs some assistance. But with COVID, mining was still going, certainly in Australia, and the pollution levels dropped, right? So what a great story. It's like people think that the resources sector pollutes, but it actually doesn't. And I think too that as we go on, the fact that we're producing, minerals for batteries, etc. I mean, that is the future. So mining is absolutely essential. We need to tell the story in a much better way. That's to not only for the industry itself, but for smart people to want to work in it. Because as we know, that's a real challenge right now. And if we don't sort it, it's actually going to be a big problem. But mining is great. And I think as a collective, we need to do more around how we tell that story better. We haven't worked that out yet, but we need to.
Hi, my name's Greg Hull, ex-Trade Commissioner. I just want to pick up the point about 100% female boards and that sort of line of thinking. I would have thought the aspiration really should be, despite the issues with STEM and women with STEM, the aspiration should be to try and get as equal as a proportion as possible of males and females across the entire vertical scale of an organisation. And that probably, you're seeing female chair people and CEOs, but the aim is to try and get more engineers or more mine managers as females.
Yeah, look, I agree, right? If we're talking diversity, I mean, obviously the easiest diversity metric is males and females, roughly 50-50. I mean, you can go into age and ethnicity, and there's a lot there. But fundamentally, 50-50, I agree. I would say that's more key. And also, we all know that on a board, you need a mix of skills. So you don't want 5 geologists, you don't want 5 lawyers. You need to have you need to look at your skills matrix and make sure that you've got a spread across the different requirements for that particular company's board. So, yeah, I would agree with you there. There's nothing wrong with having an all-female board anyway. Like, I mean, may as well. It happens with guys all the time, so...
I still feel that the pool of experienced and qualified women needs to be similar to the pool of experienced and qualified men for you to aspire to having 50-50, not only at leadership team and board levels, but also right through the organisation. And I agree with Greg, we need to be pushing more people into all the different levels within an organisation, not just focusing on the board and the leadership team. So maybe a lot more work needs to be done in high schools to encourage women to move into these STEM disciplines so that there is a larger pool of women to draw on. And I think that's one of the limiting things at the moment. And I mean, society is changing. I mean, go back to the beginning of this century. Women didn't have the vote. Look at that movie, whatever it was called, Suffragette. It's astounding, the social understanding and the social acceptance of that situation back at that time. When we look at it now, it's just abhorrent. Everything changes with time. And what we're involved in now is a change where more women, I mean, my parents, my mother's role was to be barefoot and pregnant and in the kitchen. I mean, that's the thinking back in those days. And that was accepted thinking. My oldest son has been the stay-home dad for our first grandchild for 3 years. Society is changing, everything is changing. And I think we've got to be careful not to be too critical of it not getting to where we would like it to be sooner. It's a gradual change. It certainly is happening. And I think we've got to accept that it will take time to get to some position of equal numbers of people through organisations.
And I agree, Bill, as I was saying in my day, we had no one coming to say women should be in science, whereas nowadays there's lots of people going into the schools, there's lots more opportunity. It does take time. It may take 50 years. We'll get there though.
So there have been some research that has been done, specifically looking at women in engineering, and what they found that in schools, school kids don't actually have a concept of what engineers actually do. They have ideas of what scientists do, they work in labs, but what the day-to-day experiences of an engineer, if you ask a year 8 or year 9, I'm sure in your houses it's different because their mothers are engineers, it's quite different. So there's a lot of ideas going around, what can we do at schools to ensure that they have an idea of what an engineer's life is like. So there's work being done in that space.
It is very difficult. I mean, I sort of fell into engineering because I went to school, I did all maths science, because if you were capable back then, you were kind of pushed into that area. I would have liked to have done drama, but that was too airy-fairy apparently. So the teachers were like, no, so maths science, and then I remember I got out the list of all the different professions and I went, no. Got down to accounting, optometry, nutrition, teaching and engineering, and I thought engineering sounds hard, like that sounds kind of cool. And I remember I chose it and my father said to me, what's an engineer? I said, I don't know, just sounds cool. And so he went away and did some reading and he came back and he said, engineers are problem solvers. And that's a pretty good summary, I think, of what an engineer is. But you're dead right that there's not an understanding of, and it's difficult because there's so many different disciplines of engineering and they are all quite different. So engineers as problem solvers is probably a good way to summarise it. But the work in schools is something that has been going for so long and we haven't quite cracked that either. There's a lot of activity, there's a lot of groups doing work. It hasn't translated through to results as yet. But again, I think it comes back to the whole perception. It's like a ball with a lot of different elements in it. It's not one thing that's going to solve this. But back to the pool question, exactly. We need more females studying, but also too, when we do our stats, I really think we should be splitting it out between sort of manual labour and technical professionals, because, I mean, I worked in an underground mine for a year. It was okay, but I wouldn't want to be doing it now. You know, we can't force people to do these jobs that they don't want to do. And we also don't really look at and say, oh, there aren't enough male hairdressers. You know, so I think there's some work to be done or some thinking to be done around the percentages and stats as well. Yeah.
Tara, did you want to add anything? No? is there one final question before I ask the panel to wrap up?
Yeah, sorry, Paul Innebury from Barminco. Probably a little bit directed to Kristie. How can we get your daughter to be a mining engineer?
Yeah, well, very good question. I'm still working on it. So she's studying commerce, or she'll start commerce next year. So it's been a really interesting year actually for the Year 12s. So she was accepted into commerce in term 2 of this year based on her Year 11 results. So she just wants to pass. And she said to me, you know, I'm not going to work my butt off to get a really good score because I'm already into uni. I just need to pass. And once I'm there, you can change and move around. I haven't worked that out yet, but I was also trying to get her to do a double degree because, interestingly, when I studied at uni over 25 years ago, engineering was 8 in the morning till 5 in the night, and we had so it was the contact hours were huge, whereas full-time engineering now is only 4 units, and it's been pared back so much that, yeah, we need to do a bit of work in selling the engineering and the technical story to people and to families because they don't understand what mining is. It's a complex thing. I don't know.
How much are parents more involved in the decision making almost than kids as well at that age? So like you're saying, we're in schools selling it to school kids, but it might be selling it to the wrong people.
I would say that that's very much the case. And again, it comes back to the image that mining has. So when I was at PricewaterhouseCoopers, we released a report called Global Mine, and we really challenged the concept around brand mining and what needs to be done there. So to me, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, in my opinion, around the industry being promoted well, families and individuals understanding the importance of mining, people understanding the importance of STEM itself and the careers that are possible, the fact that the workforce is becoming more flexible. Back in the day, it was common for female engineers to just stop working. And when I was lecturing at Curtin in 2012, some of the students that I was lecturing, the females are like, oh, yeah, in my mid-30s, I'll have kids and stop working. I'm like, what do you mean? So I think there's societal stuff that we need to solve as well. It's pretty complex.
Yeah, I mean, I have to add to Kristie's point. The image that young kids have of mining is big holes in the ground. It's not an exciting thing for them. We've run science camps for kids where they get to meet engineers from different disciplines, and you find that the kids really think about, okay, if I want to be an engineer, maybe I want to be an environmental engineer because then maybe I can solve climate change. Mining engineering, as much as we say, okay, this is what a mining engineer does, and the work that mining engineers is going to change, and that's something we haven't really touched on, is what the future work of a mining engineer is going to look like. But kids of today really want to be focused on solving the big problems like climate change and poverty, and they really don't see what the role of mining is in that space. So I think, as Kristie was saying, we need to do a lot more work to really showcase how mining is solving some of the world's problems, whether it's in the battery industry, whether it's with cars, etc. We need to just do a better job. Okay, we're kind of running out of time, and I really want to give the panel a few minutes just to say some words of wisdom. So maybe I'll start with Tira. What are your final words of wisdom to share?
I think I wanted to pick up on his comment. Well, he obviously doesn't have a Year 12 yet because the parents play no part, let me tell you. But they do want to solve the world's problems. They want to be the urban designer. Urban planning is important to them. They want to solve climate change. Try as I might, no idea what an accountant is in my house. I just go, oh, I think commerce, I think you have that written all over you. And now she wants to design green space. Look, yeah, mentoring's important. The message in schools, that's the only way we're going to improve the pool. Maybe one more little comment on improving the pool is, I think the massive challenge between when, and maybe this is the COVID opportunity, you know, the working from home and more flexibly. We know with time, men are staying home with kids more. My husband stayed home. At the time, maybe that opportunity can increase the pool because we got to keep them back in the industry beyond maternity leaves. We can't make it so easy for them to go, I don't know, be an influencer or become a life coach, or when they really don't have the life skill opportunities yet. So we need to keep them in the industry. And it's a big challenge, but I think we're up for it.
Okay, when I was asked to come on this panel, Women in Mining, I thought, oh, because I've come to Women in Mining discussions at ADU for many years, and I just feel very much like Julie Bishop. Just get on with it, whoever you are, male, female, get on with it, work hard, do your best, work where you're going, and don't wait and expect anything. It's up to you as an individual to do what you can in the world. You're all intelligent, go and do it.
Good summary, ladies. Mine would probably be everyone in this industry, which is such an awesome industry. We all need to do our bit, whether that's mentoring someone, thinking about how can we help. And yeah, I'd say if we all own our own career, help others to be as successful as they possibly can be, think about as a collective what we can do for this industry in order to promote it in a better way. And I completely agree, just get on with it and do it.
Thank you so much. So the final words are just get on and do it and support women progress. Please thank this wonderful and powerful panel for sharing their insights. I have, I think, one announcement to possibly make. Lunch is sponsored by Bennett & Company. This is available in the exhibition area. Thank you very much.